तव कथामृतं तप्तजीवनम् कविभिरीरितं कल्मषापहम् श्रवणमङ्गलम् श्रीमदाततं भुवि गृह्णन्ति ये भूरिदा जना. So today we are going to start a new chapter of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, the festival at Panihati, Monday, June 18, 1883. Sri Ramakrishna had been invited to the great religious festival at Panihati, near Calcutta. This festival of the flattened rice was inaugurated by Raghunath Das, a disciple of Sri Chaitanya. It is said that Raghunath used to run away from home, secretly practice his devotions, and enjoy the bliss of spiritual ecstasy. One day Nityananda said to him, "Thief, you run away from home and enjoy the love of God all alone. You hide it from us. I shall punish you today. You must arrange a religious festival and entertain the devotees with flattened rice." Since then, the festival has been annually celebrated at Panihati by the Vaishnavas. Thousands of followers of Sri Chaitanya participate in it. Its chief feature is the singing of the names and glories of God and the dancing of the devotees in religious fervor. The center of the festivity is the temple of Ramakrishna, built on the bank of the Ganges. The crowd with the master in the center surged towards the temple of Ramakrishna. Only a small number could enter. The rest stood outside the portal and jostled with one another to have a look at Sri Ramakrishna. In a mood of intoxication, he began to dance in the courtyard of the shrine. Every now and then his body stood transfixed in deep samadhi. Hundreds of people around him shouted the name of God, and thousands outside caught the strain and raised the cry with full-throated voices. The echo traveled over the Ganges, striking a note in the hearts of the people in the boats on the holy river, and they too chanted the name of God. In the afternoon, the master was sitting in Manishan's drawing room with the devotees. Navadvip was also near him. The master now started his conversation, and as per the bhakti tradition, the various states of bhakti, that's what he started enunciating. So what he's saying, Master, bhakti matured becomes bhava. Next is mahabhava, then prema, and last of all is the attainment of God. Gauranga experienced the states of mahabhava and prema. When prema is awakened, a devotee completely forgets the world. He also forgets his body, which is so dear to a man. Gauranga experienced prema. He jumped into the ocean, thinking it to be the Jamuna. The ordinary jiva does not experience mahabhava or prema. He goes only as far as bhava. But Gauranga experienced all three states. Isn't that so? So here we find Sri Ramakrishna is speaking of the ladder of devotional love as has been enunciated in the Gaudiya tradition. This Gauda actually indicates Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He was of a very golden complexion, and that's why he was called Gaur, and the tradition which followed him is called the Gaudiya tradition. So in that we find that as per the devotional fervor which was manifested through Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that based on that we find in the Vaishnava tradition, especially in the Gaudiya tradition, they have chalked out a ladder of devotional love, a hierarchy, that how gradually the love, the devotion ripens, gets seasoned, gets matured. So first is bhakti or devotion, just the initial loving service to God. As we are studying in the Bhagavatam, it speaks of the sadhana bhakti, that through hearing, chanting, remembering, serving, all those practices, that Navadha Bhakti, the ninefold practices, Sravana, Kirtana, and then Smarana, Sevana, Pada Sevana, and then Archana, Vandana, Sakhya, Dasya, Atma Nivedana. So these all speaks of the preparatory bhakti. So with all these practices, when the devotion ripens, and then a devotee may start experiencing this bhava. Sri Ramakrishna speaking of this bhakti ripens into bhava. What's that? It's a devotional mood. It's much more matured bhakti. The heart constantly feels the God's presence. So it's no more, there is no need for practice. He is always in that perpetual state of bliss. He experiences the presence of God in his heart, and it finds its early expressions, the early signs we find in the form of ecstasy. It may appear as some external signs like tears out of bhakti, just hearing the name of God, or listening to his pastimes, or listening to some bhajans, kirtan. The emotion wells up, and that may find expression as tears, trembling, as we find that because of that exuberance of devotion, the trembling, the joy, this all starts finding expression through the devotee, these bodily manifestations of all these devotional expressions. And then even an ordinary devotee can reach this state. But after that, he's speaking of the prema. In the Bhakti Shastra, what is that? The love for God becomes irresistible and unbroken. It has much more intensified. The devotee forgets the world, even his own body. That his devotional fervor is so intense that even in our day-to-day life we find that when we are intensely doing something about which we are passionate, the things which we like, it makes us forget everything, even our own body. Thing which we are doing with intense passion. You'll find a musician, even an artist, any type of this professional art, or even skating, skiing, that also needs some skills. There we find that they go into a state of flow. Those who have developed the skills have become adept in their practices, and that allows them to enter into a state of flow where they're so focused in what they're doing, the other things are not registered by the mind. They start falling off. And that's why we find there's a state where one even forgets the world and even his own body. It's a very natural, spontaneous way of renunciation. No force. That my love for the thing which is my ishta, my desired goal, has become so intense that the love for the other worldly things have fallen off naturally. In the words of Ramakrishna, as you go towards the more and more you travel towards the east, the west naturally falls behind. So that's the state which we find in the state of prema. The life is sustained only by the vision and the remembrance of God. Without that, they cannot think of the life. That becomes the crux of their life, the central theme of their life. And that leads to Mahabhava. In the ordinary souls, this Mahabhava, this cannot manifest. It needs a special substratum, special body. As Sri Ramakrishna used to say very nicely, that if a mad elephant enters into a cottage made of mud, it simply shatters it. So Mahabhava is something like that, a tremendous force of a mad elephant. For that, you need a special type of psychophysical existence, a special type of body which can withhold that. And that's why we find only in very highly evolved souls, in the avatars, the divine incarnations, like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, this type of Mahabhava could manifest. What is that? We found in the Bhakti tradition, they say, this Mahabhava has been found only in Radha and in Gauranga Mahaprabhu. And it has some 8 sattvika vikaras, the 8 signs. What are those 8 signs? They say Stambha, Sweda, Romancha, Swarabhanga, and then Kampa, and the next comes Vaivarna, and then Asru, Pralaya. Last is Pralaya. So what actually they are? Stambha means like paralysis. He becomes like something inert object, Stambha. That he is so much intensely absorbed in the divine contemplation, the external signs of life is not seen anymore. He becomes something like an inert object. That's the Stambha. And then when the Bhava becomes more intensified, we find perspiration, Sweda, that he is perspiring. Even in our ordinary life, we will find that when we are extremely emotional, these things may find expression through our body. But here it is because of the divine love. This Sweda, Stambha, Romancha, horripilation. The hairs stand on end. That's tremendous, that because of the tremendous excitement of the devotional ecstasy. Swarabhanga, choked voice. So these are not uncommon. Even in our day-to-day life, for any emotional upsurge, we do observe these things. But here, it is because of the love of God and God alone. And that too, Mahabhava, all these signs, these 8 signs, they all appear together. That in our life, so what to speak of the divine love, that's something very rare. Even if we have some upsurge of emotion because of our love for our near and dear ones, 1 or 2 of these signs may manifest. But for all the 8 signs to manifest spontaneously, we can never see. For that you need a tremendous, a special type of adhara, a special type of your body. In this ordinary body cannot withhold this intense bhava because of all these 8 symptoms. So this romancha, horripilation, swarabhanga, choked voice, kampa, trembling, vaivarnya, the body color changes, you will find. Even we find that he has become pale out of fear. He is looking radiant because of some tremendous joy. So that body color changes. So that's the Vaivarnya. Asru, tears roll down. And Pralaya. And at last, if the bhava is too strong, we find the faint. Even in the life of Sri Ramakrishna, we found all these signs finding expression through his body. And that speaks of the Mahabhava. It needs a special body. That as Sri Ramakrishna used to say, this Bhava Hasti enters and as if ransacks the body. It's such powerful. So to withhold that, you need a special super divine power. And that is the Mahabhava. Which Sri Ramakrishna is speaking that when Bhava ripens, it ripens into this Mahabhava. And this Mahabhava, all these 8 signs erupt forcefully. That is called Uddipta. This inflamed ecstasy, Uddipta. They're all finding expression together. And love becomes blazing and uncontrollable. A tremendous upsurge of this devotional fervor. And when all this finds expression together, that's the Mahabhava. And then what happens at last? This awareness of the external world is lost. This is called Ruddha Mahabhava. At last, the Sri Ramakrishna's definition of prema coincides with this stage. That after Mahabhava comes prema. What happens? That the love is so intense that all the awareness of the external world is lost. He goes into a state of that he almost faints, that the last sign which has been spoken of, the pralaya, and the devotee is completely consumed by divine absorption. That from outside he may appear inert. It may, the one who is not acquainted with this devotional tradition, he may feel, what has happened? He looks like an inert object. But inwardly, subjectively, there's a tremendous joy going on within. He's experiencing that. And that's the thing, he's completely consumed by the divine absorption. And the awareness of the external world is lost totally. So that's the thing which we find through devotion going to the state of prema, which is equivalent to samadhi. That there is very intense absorption which is making you forget everything else. And then this rarest stage was seen, as in the bhakti tradition we are saying, only in Radha and Gauranga. So the pinnacle of the ecstatic union with the God, and unbearable anguish of separation from God. So you'll find that now, just here listening to the kirtana, listening to some divine singing, they're going to that state of Mahabhava, where they are enjoying the bliss of union with the divine. And when they come back from that state, then suddenly that unification with the divine is lost. There's a viraha dasha. And then there's an intense yearning to get back that again. So the viraha is considered as a very high state, where just the way we as an ordinary person cannot live a single moment without breathing. So viraha dasha speaks of this highly evolved soul. For them, the union with the divine has became just like their breath. A moment of forgetfulness make them have the tremendous anguish of separation from God. So, in summary, what we can say? That the ordinary devotees at the most can have this bhava. The elevated souls may reach prema, but only the divine incarnations, the avatara, as in the bhakti tradition they spoke of Radha and even the Gauranga Mahaprabhu. And in the recent days, in the life of Ramakrishna, we saw this full manifestation of this Mahabhava, where all the 8 the signs of intense devotion manifests through their body spontaneously. So that's what Sri Ramakrishna is indicating, is just enumerating. That isn't it this what has been spoken of in the Bhakti Shastras? As Navadvip is is a scholar in the Vaishnava tradition, so seeing him, meeting him, Sri Ramakrishna, naturally that all these ideas which has been enunciated in the Bhakti Shastra, and not only that, which he himself experienced through his life, that's what he is enumerating. It just seeing Navadvipa, the one who can really relate to what Sri Ramakrishna is saying. Sri Ramakrishna immediately speaks of all these various ladders of devotional manifestations, the hierarchy, the master. In the inmost state, the Navadvip, yes sir, that is true. The inmost state, the semi-conscious state, and the conscious state. So very interesting. So after that, in Bhakti tradition, they speak. This bhava, this is one way of describing the devotion, the ladder of devotion, as bhava, mahabhava, prema, as Sri Ramakrishna has indicated. There is another way. In the life of Mahaprabhu, we find that now and then he is engaged in kirtana along with the other devotees, singing, dancing, going down the street, taking the name of the Lord. That is something bahya dasha. He is aware of the world. He is interacting with the world. And then when that devotional fervor becomes more intense, he goes to a stage called ardha bahya dasha. He is not fully aware of the world. That finds manifestation through his life. And then at last it becomes this, this fully, totally absorbed, this in the state. And that is the antardasha, the inner state. He is in the state of samadhi. He has forgotten of the total world. These three states was visible, has manifested in the life of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and that's what Navadvip is indicating. And listening to that, Master immediately responded by saying, in the inmost, now he is describing. Navadvip just mentioned those three states, the Antardasha, the Ardha Bahya Dasha, and the Bahya Dasha. And now Sri Ramakrishna is explaining those three states, which he himself has experienced through his life. What he's saying, in the inmost state, he would remain in samadhi, unconscious of the outer world. In the semi-conscious state, he could only dance. In the conscious state, he chanted the name of God. So if you go through the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, you will find again and again, these are the three states even Sri Ramakrishna is going through in his life. This wonderful description of in the Gospel, which his author, Sri Aim, has described wonderfully. The same thing which he has experienced, that he is speaking here to Navadvip by indicating that Mahaprabhu, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, was a living example of these three states, this antardasha. This is the deepest absorption in samadhi, when one becomes unconscious of the world. We find in the life of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that his body appeared inert or motionless. He was absorbed in the Krishna's Leela, that inwardly he was enjoying the pastimes of Krishna, and outside the body was appearing as inert, just like a stump it was appearing. And that's the Antardasha. And what is Ardha Bahir Dasha, Ardha Bahya Dasha? Half conscious. He is overwhelmed by the prema. He experiences ecstasy through nritya, vilapa, lamentation, kampa, trembling. So all this finds expression in this Ardha Bahir Dasha. And the Bahir Dasha, what is that? When he is fully conscious of the outer world, and though he is permeated with prema, is full of that devotional fervor, but yes, he is aware of both, engages in Nama Sankirtana, leading devotees in chanting. So, all these states, Sri Ramakrishna gives a very nice example in some other context. What he says, very interesting, that people say that we have to keep the balance. Too much devotion is not good. You have to keep the balance. Devotion is okay, but that shouldn't make you forget the world. It shouldn't make you something like inert object. You have to maintain the balance in such a way that your integrity as per your worldly way of life is concerned is in no way disrupted. And Sri Ramakrishna simply used to say very nicely that you speak of maintaining both. Even a drunkard cannot do that. When he has taken just 1 or 2 pegs, he may be maintaining both the balance between both the world. But if he has drank a bit more, can he maintain the balance between these two? No. He gets totally intoxicated. And that speaks of these 3 states. When the divine fervor he is experiencing, but still it has to become more intense. That's the Bahya Dasha, Bahir Dasha. And when it becomes a bit more intense, we find he's started losing the consciousness of the external world. And then he loses the consciousness of the external world totally. That's the Antardasha. He's in deep samadhi. So these 3 states which Chaitanya Mahaprabhu used to go through, that Sri Ramakrishna is describing. Now Navadvip introduced his son to the master. The young man was a student of the scriptures. He saluted Sri Ramakrishna. Now Navadvip, what is introducing? By saying that he studies the scriptures at home. Previously, one hardly saw a copy of the Vedas in this country. Max Muller has translated them, so people can now read these books. Now the master is saying something very, very significant. That what's the purpose of the scriptures? That's the thing Sri Ramakrishna is now indicating after hearing that he is studying the scriptures. So Sri Ramakrishna, as a word of warning, is saying something which is very, very significant in the life of each and every aspirant. What that? Sri Ramakrishna, too much study of the scriptures does more harm than good. The important thing is to know the essence of the scriptures. After that, what is the need of books? One should learn the essence and then dive deep in order to realize God. So what's the limitation of the scriptural studies? It is meant to be a means, not the end. It's just like the map. It's like the GPS. It can help you to go to the destination. That's its purpose. It's just like a letter of a list of things which has to be procured, as Sri Ramakrishna used to say. That someone has sent a letter that such and such festival is coming. I will be there at the time of festival, but before that the preparations has to be made. You have to be ready with all the logistics of the festival. So he writes a letter at home that as I am busy with my work, I will be just there at the time of the festival, but before that all these arrangements has to be made, and he gives a long list. Now somehow the family members lost that letter. Now they were in frantic search of the letter. Oh, we have to procure all those things, and we have lost that letter. They were in frantic search, and at last they got the letter. And now that from the letter they became aware of the list of all the items which they have to procure. And once they have procured, the letter about which they were so frantic, they were searching so frantically, it has lost its importance. They will now simply throw it off. Its purpose has been served. So, it's just there as a means. At last, when I reach the goal, it has no purpose. As Buddha used to say, no one carries the raft on his shoulder after crossing the river. The scriptures are like that raft. It helps us to cross this ocean of ignorance, this worldly existence. It just helps us to cross that. But after that, when we go to the spiritual realization, it has no value. So excessive reading without practice, it's like a trap. As Shankaracharya in Vivek Chudamani very nicely has said, this what? Shabdajalang maharanyam chitta brahmanakaranam. This mesh of words is just like a forest, in a deep forest. Once you enter, you will find it's very difficult to come out. You lose your way. So this all the trees that once you enter into that, this mesh, this network of trees, and you lose the sense of direction. You get lost. And now Shankaracharya is saying Shabda Jalam. All these words are like that net, Jala. And it creates, with this word, we create a huge forest. And that becomes the cause of the Chitta, Brahmanakara. Your mind just simply, uselessly goes on wandering on it without going to any destination. So that's why excessive reading without practice can trap the mind in intellectual arguments, endless debates, and egoistic pride in knowing. That's it. The ego also develops. Oh, I know, I am the Pandita. So in no way it can help spiritually unless the study of the scripture leads me, motivates me for practice, and the practice takes me to the realization. So that's why Sri Ramakrishna is to say that what is the use of counting mango trees and leaves? Better eat one mango and be satisfied. That some person goes to a mango orchard to test the mangoes, and then after going there he forgets. He just goes on counting the leaves, the branches, the number of trees, and he thinks he is a big scholar, but the purpose was to test the mango. He has forgotten that. Now, what has happened? He is simply roaming in that mango orchard, engaged in some actions which as such is fruitless. So that's what Sri Ramakrishna is. This is the limitation of the mere scriptural studies. So what we have to do? We have to know the essence of the scripture. What is the essence? As Sri Ramakrishna mentioned Hari Maharaj, Swami Turiyananda. For many days he didn't turn up to Dakshineshwar. And then Sri Ramakrishna asked, what happened? For such a long time you were absent. I have not seen him. You. And Turiyananda then said he also was a very ardent, student of Vedanta. So he was very deeply absorbed in the studies of Vedanta. That's what he said. I was engrossed in the studies of Vedanta. And listening that Sri Ramakrishna, immediately what he said, after all, there's so much reading you are doing. You are reading so much. What's the essence of it? Brahma Satya Jagat Mithya, isn't it? That the world is illusory, God alone is true. If that is so, why not renounce the entanglements of this world through your spiritual practice and try to be unified with the God? So once you know the essence, why just simply waste your time in reading the scripture? So that's the thing, that Brahman alone is real, the world is transient, and the soul is not different from the Brahman. A Jnana Yogi thinks for him that's the essence of the scriptures. For a Bhakti tradition, that the God is the nearest and the dearest one. Devotion and surrender purify our heart, and then the love of God is the goal. I start with the love, I end with the love. Para Bhakti. A sadhana bhakti ends up in that supreme devotion. Raganuga Bhakti, Para Bhakti. So that's in the Bhakti tradition. If that's so, why just waste your time in reading the scriptures? Once you know that, what's the essence, then endeavor to make it a reality in through your life. So once this essence is grasped, then what happens? The scriptural words have served its function. Then give more importance to the sadhana. So this book knowledge is paroksha. In our scriptures, this is paroksha jnana. It is indirect knowledge. And realization is the aparoksha jnana. So that is something you have experienced. Unless you have experienced, all the knowledge is aparoksha, indirect. They as such serve no purpose. It gives some intellectual conviction. But without realization, that intellectual conviction in no way can help us to transcend the dualities of worldly existence. So, to get this aparoksha jnana, what is required? One has to pray, one has to meditate, one has to practice devotion, have to purify the heart by service, by practicing selfless, karma yoga. And then constantly remember God and not just study the scriptures. Have to develop, constantly remember the God, constantly try to develop devotion. So it is just as we were saying, that just as a recipe book, can it satisfy your hunger unless the food is cooked and eaten? So the scriptural knowledge must be digested through practice. It has to be assimilated. As Sri Ramakrishna very nicely used to say, that someone has seen milk, but seeing milk, someone has heard of milk, someone has seen milk, but does it serve any purpose? No. One has to drink it, digest it, assimilate it, and become nourished by it. So this is the thing which has to be internalized. It has to become a part and parcel of our life. As Sri Ramakrishna one day asked Naren, that just see, there's the almanac, bring it to me. When Sri Ramakrishna, Swami Vivekananda, Naren took that almanac to Sri Ramakrishna. Now Sri Ramakrishna says, squeeze it. Naren was just perplexed. Why is asking? And then Sri Ramakrishna's remark was something very significant. So see, in the almanac it is written that this year there is going to be torrential rain. Now you squeeze that almanac, you won't get a single drop of water. So as long as you are not getting water, it is a mere dry book. So that's the thing. So if you go squeeze it, not a single drop of water will come out of it. So what has been spoken in the scripture has to manifest through our life. The life should be the best interpretation of the scripture, is a living example. So for that, one has to practice and go to the realization. Otherwise, we may get lost in the forest of mere words. That's what Sri Ramakrishna is warning. When he heard that his son, this Navadvip son, he is also as per his father's way of life, he is also studying and is on the process of becoming a scholar. Sri Ramakrishna is warning that just don't become a dry scholar. To develop that devotion is the be-all and end-all of the bhakti tradition. And then we find Sri Ramakrishna is giving a very nice example, like the Gita, Bhagavad Gita. It has 18 chapters, 700 verses, quite big text. We study for years with all its commentaries and with its tikas, tippanis, commentaries, commentary on commentary, notes, and it becomes such a voluminous study. And we get lost in that study. And Sri Ramakrishna, what is saying? The Divine Mother has revealed to me the essence of Vedanta. It is that Brahman alone is real and the world illusory. The essence of the Gita is what you get by repeating the word 10 times. The word becomes reversed. It is then Tagi. If you just go and say Gita, 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 then you can find that Gita, Gita, it becomes audible as Tagi, 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 Tagi. And this Tagi is something which is synonymous to Tyagi. Tyagi means the one who has renounced. So this Tagi refers to renunciation. It is then Tagi which refers to renunciation. And now Sri Ramakrishna is saying that you study the entire Gita. But after all, what is the essence of the Gita? Tyaga, Tyagi. The essence of Gita is, O man, renounce everything and practice spiritual discipline for the realization of God. So knowing that, the essence, now give more importance to this practice. Make that the only goal of your life. Navadvi. But how can we persuade our minds to renounce? So that's the big question. Yes, the scripture says we have to renounce and we have to be devoted to God. But we find that it's not that easy. How to, even in Gita also we find that Arjuna is asking the same question to Bhagavan Sri Krishna. That the mind is just like the wind. The way it is so difficult to control the wind. Can you control the wind? So it is always flowing. So it is almost impossible to control the mind. Controlling the mind is just like controlling the wind. It is almost impossible. How to do that? And then the master, what he is now saying, is saying, you are a Goswami. It is your duty to officiate as priest in the temple. You cannot renounce the world. Otherwise, who will look after the temple and its services? You have to renounce mentally. So it is the same message as we find in the Bhagavad Gita. It is God Himself who has kept you in the world to set an example to men. You may resolve in your mind 1,000 times to renounce the world, but you will not succeed. God has given you such a nature that you must perform your worldly duties. The same idea we find even in the Bhagavad Gita, that Bhagavan is speaking of Swabhava, that one's temperament is something which is unique. We cannot artificially impose another nature on ourselves. Now a priest's Swabhava is inclined towards service, ritual, doing rituals, teaching, devotion. So how can, even if you say that I have to renounce everything and just give my full this attention, focus to the devotional practices, you will find it's not possible. Your Swabhava, your temperament will force you back to your way of living. So that's why we find even in Bhagavad Gita, in the 18th chapter, the 60th verse, Bhagavan is saying, this is what he is saying, Swabhava Jaina Kaunteya, Nivaddha Svena Karmana, Kartum Nechhasi Yan Mohat, Karishye Sopi, what is this? Karishye Avashopi Tat. Avashopi. Means even if that action which out of delusion you do not wish to do, that you think, oh, this action is something which is not allowing me to evolve spiritually, let me renounce. So out of delusion you are not willing to do it. Then what has happened? You will be driven to do it by your own inclination. You will be forced, born of your nature, your Swabhava, it will force you. So don't try to renounce forcefully. As Sri Ramakrishna is to give that example, that when there is a scab on your wound, you forcefully remove it, the wound lacerates. You have to allow it to heal, fall off naturally. At the most, what you can do, you can accelerate the process of healing by applying ointment, by applying some herbal medicine. And then that scab falls off naturally. So that's what Sri Ramakrishna is saying, that what is that ointment? That's the bhakti. If you try to forcefully remove it, you will be doing harm to yourself. Give just smear it with bhakti, and then the scab falls off naturally, automatically. That's the way. So you cannot force yourself. That's what Sri Ramakrishna is saying. That what? It is God Himself who has kept you in the world to set an example to men. You may resolve in your mind 1,000 times to renounce the world, but you will not succeed. God has given you such a nature that you must perform your worldly duties. Krishna said to Arjuna, what do you mean? You will not fight. By your mere will, you cannot desist from fighting. Your very nature will make you fight. It's so true in each and every one's life. If you just try to see, so many times it has happened. We thought, oh, I am fed up with all this, I will renounce. And you will find, even if you succeed to somehow get rid of that action, again, somehow, you will find that you have to again come back and do that work, because your nature won't allow you to simply renounce that action. So what's the way out? That's why he's saying renunciation, renounce mentally. That's the very important thing. That Sri Ramakrishna, that example of a maidservant, her mind is always with her child at village home, but she has left her home, hearth and home, to sustain herself. She has to earn something, and that's why she is living in the master's house, looking after the master's household. She is caring for the master's children, the master's household duties, as if they are their own child. But the bottom of her heart, she knows her child is there in that remote village. Her mind always remains with the child in the village. And that's how we have to work in our day-to-day life. Then let the mind be on God, but our body should go on with the actions which the divine has ordained us to take care of. So that's this teaching is, that's why we find it's deeply practical. It balances the ideal of renunciation with the reality of one's duty, swadharma. So renunciation is not only about leaving the household, family or work. True renunciation means what? It's actually giving up ego, attachment, craving. And there are few who are called for, it is by the plan of the divine, who are called for the external renunciation. There are few. They are living as monks. But for the majority, the renunciation has to be mental renunciation. That's what the God has planned. That is His plan. Otherwise, His creation would be sustained. So, though a few do have the scope to renounce physically, but for most, the majority, this mental renunciation is the only way. Now, for a Goswami, a householder priest, outer renunciation would mean abandoning all his work which has to do with the society. This is like looking after the temple, its worship. So all this work has some purpose. They are serving the society. So many people get associated with the God, with devotion, because of this temple, because of these ritualistic services. And if a Goswami renounces that, just think what will happen to the majority. They won't have that anchor to just hold on for their spiritual practices. So the great service he is doing, as Sri Ram, when Girish Chandra Ghosh wanted to renounce, Sri Ramakrishna says, no, this theater is for you. And for why? With that, lok shikkha hobe. That you are somehow this teaching, you are creating an awareness in the society about so many values. through this theater. So that is the Lok Shiksha, Loka Shikha. And that has been spoken of in the Bhagavad Gita. We find that here in Bhagavad Gita there is the idea of what they say, Loka Sangraha. Loka Sangraha. That when you are doing your duty, at the same time you're detached and you're trying to keep your mind in God, because of your action, Abhyudaya and Nishreyasa goes both hand in hand. You are trying for your own emancipation, but not at the cost of Abhyudaya, the Loka Sangraha, the well-being of the entire society. So that's why Sri Ramakrishna, when this Navadvipa Swami, he's speaking of that how is it possible to control the mind just by continuing to do with all these duties. Sri Ramakrishna is saying, you are a Goswami. Your Swabhava will make you do that. Don't think of that external renunciation. It will be a grossly foolish act. Continue with that. And the renunciation has to be in your mind. So that's what the God has ordained for most of the humanity. That all cannot have that physical renunciation. Though a few may have that scope, that blessing. But for majority it has to be. Because with that only, that what offer that how to offer this renounce mentally, offer every action to God and live in the world but keeping the mind fixed on the divine. In the words of Sri Ramakrishna, just like a lotus in the water, which grows and blooms yet remains untouched by the water. So that's the way one has to conduct one's life. So Sri Ramakrishna, that's how he's showing the way out. That don't suddenly, because of some emotional upsurge, think of renouncing. You have to stay as per the divine plan. You have to continue as a Goswami. But at the same time, don't get attached to the world. So that's the way out which he is speaking of. So and we find that at the mere mention of Krishna and Arjuna, the master went into samadhi. In the twinkling of an eye, his body became motionless and his eyeballs transfixed, while his breathing could scarcely be noticed. At this sudden transformation, Navadvip and his son and the other devotees looked at the master in mute wonder. Regaining partial consciousness, he said to Navadvip, Yoga and Bhoga, you Goswamis have both. Now your only duty is to call on God and pray to Him sincerely. O God, I don't want the glories of thy world-bewitching Maya. I want Thee alone. God dwells in all beings undoubtedly. That being the case, who may be called His devotee? He who dwells in God. He who has merged his mind and life and innermost soul in God. So this is a very important thing. That to dwell in God means to shift the center of one's being away from the ego, from this body-centric awareness, from this away ego, desire, and all these transient attachments, and to root it in the divine. Where the ordinary person may live in the world and only occasionally remember God, a devotee lives in God and only occasionally engages with the world. As Brahmananda ji used to say, that keep your mind in God. With 3/4 of your mind keep in God, just with 1/4 of your mind, you can do all your worldly activities, and those worldly activities will be more perfect than the man who is engrossed in worldly duties alone because of various attachments. What happens? The man who has forsaken God is fully engrossed in the world. We may think he will be more perfectly doing the work. No. Because of in so many biases, because of his desires, he won't be able to see the thing properly. he will be short-sighted. He cannot have a broad vision. But a man who is, this established in the divine, with 3/4 of his mind, he can keep in God, and with 1/4 mind, whatever work he does will be perfect. He says, with 1/4 mind, you can conduct your way of life, and with 3/4 mind, you can keep it engaged in the thought of the God. That's what Brahmananda is saying. So that's the thing. Here also we find Sri Ramakrishna is indicating. So there's a reversal of perspective. God in all beings is a hidden truth, but it is a passive fact of existence. It's a passive fact that God is there in everything. But dwelling in God is an active choice. God is in all beings. Sri Ramakrishna is saying, but who is a devotee? Who dwells in God. For that we have to have a proactive choice. That speaks of endeavor. That speaks of surrendering to the divine. That speaks of discipline. That speaks of love. So dwelling in God is an active choice of the seeker. And the God in all beings is just a passive fact. It is a fact. We have nothing to do with it. But to dwell in God. God is dwelling in the world, everything. That is just a fact of life. That is passive. That is, no endeavor is required to believe in it. But to realize that to dwell in God, for dwelling in God, that needs an active endeavor in our part. It's active choice, endeavor. So that's what Sri Ramakrishna is indicating. Who is a devotee? One who dwells in God. So there, that speaks of our choice of how to lead the life and how to attain this fulfillment, which is only possible in this human birth. So the master returned to the sense plane, referring to his samadhi, said to Navadvip, some say that the state of mind is a disease. I say to them, how can one become unconscious by thinking of him whose consciousness has made the whole world conscious? So as Swami Vivekananda used to say, the opposite poles look alike. One who is in deep samadhi looks inert, and a person who is in deep sleep, he also looks inert. Then many confuse that samadhi is nothing but a state of deep sleep. And then Swamiji in one sentence differentiates between these two. They look alike, they're opposite poles. All the opposite poles, like intense light, I cannot see. Very feeble light, I cannot see. Intense sound, I cannot hear. Feeble sound, I cannot hear. They're all same, but there's a pole apart. Here also is a pole apart. So how is distinguishing? He's saying a fool goes into a state of sleep. He comes back as a fool. A fool goes into a state of samadhi, comes back as a wise man. So this is a pole apart. So seeing a person going into a state of unconsciousness by thinking of God may think, oh, it's not desirable. It makes you lose your consciousness. So they don't realize that actually it is an intense absorption within. It's a state of high awareness where our mind is fully alert. It's not in a state of vegetative mode. It's fully alert. Is alert of its because of the tremendous awareness of the divine within, and that makes one appear something like inert, but inwardly he is extremely alert. So that's what Sri Ramakrishna is saying. How can one become unconscious? By thinking of the consciousness of God. So he is intensely thinking. Outwardly, the signs are the sign of something like one has entered a state of swoon or a state of coma, a vegetative existence. But inwardly, he is extremely alert. So that's what Sri Ramakrishna is saying, that many may think that my state is a disease. I say to them, how can one become unconscious? by thinking of him whose consciousness has made the whole world conscious. Sri Ramakrishna, accompanied by the devotees, took a carriage to return to Dakshineshwar. They were going to pass the temple garden of Motishil. On the way, for a long time, the master had been asking him to take him to the reservoir in the garden in order that he might teach him how to meditate on the formless God. There were tame fish in the reservoir. Nobody harmed them. Visitors threw puffed rice and other bits of food into the water, and the big fish came in swarms to eat the food. Fearlessly, the fish swam in the water and sported there joyously. Coming to the reservoir, the master said to him, "Look at the fish. Meditating on the formless God is like swimming joyfully, like this fish, in the ocean of bliss and consciousness." So all the ego boundaries has dissolved. You are one with that this Brahman. Your soul has gone beyond all the boundaries. So that's the state which he is speaking of. So it's a type of upasana. So this type of visualizations helps you, that this type of visualization is not realization, but this type of visualization is called upasana, approaching the truth. This type of visualization at last helps you to go to that ultimate realization. And that's why Sri Ramakrishna, as Master Mahashaya, the one who is the author of the gospel, at the very big in the initial stages of his life, he was more inclined towards the way of knowledge, jnana marga. And that's why for him, Sri Ramakrishna is giving a particular way of upasana practice. They practice this way. Think you are like a fish just swimming in the boundless ocean. All the ego boundaries has fallen off. You are, merged in the bliss of the absolute. So that's the upasana which Sri Ramakrishna is speaking of. So we will continue with this is the remaining portion of the conversation in the succeeding classes. But as we have already announced that from the 21st to the 4th of October, there won't be any classes because of the Navaratri celebrations. So we will be meeting again. We will be just conducting this class after the 2 weeks after the 4th of October. So having this nice break, and then after the break we will again continue with the study of this Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. So with this we stop our discussion today. Thank you all. Namaskars.